What is faith? Good question. What is faith? A lot of people think they know what faith is. Do you know what faith is? From a God point of view, what is faith? And that's what we're exploring. So come along. We'll continue along in the story of Noah and faith. This is the continuation of the study of the men and women of faith that we see under the law in the Old Testament, and we're using the outline that God has given us in Hebrews chapter 11, and this is a continuation of Hebrews 11:7. There's a lot to the story of Noah, and so we're taking a lot of time on it. And it says in Hebrews 11:7, by faith Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By his faith he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. So we have this story. Then the last lesson, we saw how we cannot just reject the story of Noah and the box. Ark means box. Noah and the box, because Jesus took it quite literally. And if we don't believe in the story of Noah and the box that saved his family from the flood that destroyed the world, then we're saying we don't believe Jesus. And if we don't believe Jesus, then we might as well just go party, as Paul says in another place. So, God has warned at this point, Noah, at this point where we pick up the story in Genesis chapter 7, God has warned Noah that there's a great catastrophe coming, that it involves a flood of water. It says that he was warned of things not yet seen. There is a lot of evidence in the Bible that what it's trying to say, and the Bible does contain some scientific observations. It's not an exhaustive book of science, but it does contain accurate science. And frequently the science has turned out to be better than the science of the current time. For example, 200 years BC, when the Old Testament was translated from Hebrew to Greek, the so-called Septuagint, they went and they saw that in Genesis, it said in chapter 1, it said that God made a big empty expanse between the earth and the stars. And they said, whoa, whoa, we're trained university scientists, and we're going to go with the settled science. Everybody knows that it's settled science that the stars are lanterns fixed by the gods on a great crystal dome. Crystalline, it's the word that is used for rock crystal, pure rock crystal, that is pure clear silica. It's also the word that's used for clear glass. And that there's this crystal dome that the lights of the night are fixed upon. And the idea of it's an empty space was ludicrous. And so they translated it crystalline, which then became in Latin something which became firmament in the King James Bible. You know, the Septuagint is wrong. It is not a crystalline. It's empty space. We know that now. You see, sometimes when people try to harmonize the Bible to settled science, the settled science becomes unsettled in the next generation or several generations later. Science has a tendency to do that. Quantum theory is accepted these days as settled science. Einstein said, I am convinced that God does not play dice with the universe, thereby trying to refute Heisenberg. Now, Heisenberg's theories are considered settled science. I'm not going to take sides. The point is that what is considered settled science by one generation is considered obsolete by the next. And we'll get into that as we come. But there is a lot of pieces that you can put together of seemingly scientific observations, and it may not be intended as scientific observations in the Bible, but if we take some of them at, as what is it trying to say here, it seems to be saying that the earth then was surrounded by a vapor cloud, and it's been modeled, it can be computer modeled, that it's quite a stable thing. You would have a super cooled water, not cloud like you can't see through it, a water vapor layer that would have been in the high upper atmosphere. Light would come through it. Stars would be seen at night. It's just, when we say vapor, we think of that cloudy looking stuff. But from a scientific point of view, a vapor is a gas, and it's just clear like oxygen or nitrogen, carbon dioxide. I mean, we have water in the air now, and we don't necessarily see it when it's purely a gas. And so that it was a gas, and that in Noah's flood that this all condensed out. It is a scientifically viable construct. It can be modeled very well. Is that what the Bible is trying to tell us is what happened? We can debate that. So, Genesis chapter 7. But before we get to Genesis chapter 7, if that were the case, though, if there were this moderating layer of water vapor, gaseous hydrogen, dihydrogen oxide, or as we call it, water, gaseous dihydrogen oxide all over the, surrounding the earth, one of the things that we would see is that we would not have the violent weather that we have now. And so the idea that it would just be like the fog forests, such as you find off the coast of Namibia or in the redwood and sequoia areas, this would be the kind of thing that you would see. And that's what seems to be described in the Garden of Eden. A mist would rise and water the garden. And so he hadn't seen torrential rain ever. Maybe what it's trying to tell us. But we do know that he had certainly not seen a catastrophic flood, the deluge, before. And he's warned of things not seen. And it says in the last verse of chapter 6 of Genesis, Noah did everything just as God commanded him. And that is this demonstration of faith. It's not that we're saved by the works we do because of faith. We're not saved by works, and we're not saved by the works we do because of faith, thereby somehow making the works into faith. It's when we have faith, that is, we believe God, there are some things we do just naturally. Okay? I was thinking as I walked through the woods and doing some trekking, how many people have trekked, particularly young people like to trek. They go off trying to do something. And how many true stories there are that rangers tell of people who were told, this is the weather that's coming, and they didn't believe it. And they end up, let's say in the Grand Canyon, caught in a flash flood, swept away in a flash flood. They died. Their bodies are found miles downstream. Why? They didn't believe. And then there's others who believe what the ranger told them about the dangers of flash flood and how the weather is deteriorating. And so they save their lives. It is not reasonable to go out into flash flood country when a thunderstorm's coming. I mean, unless you want to die, and most people don't want to die. And so it's not a question of, oh, that's works. Well, it's just the ordinary, normal behavior when you believe certain things. Okay? There are places around here where people don't swim because they believe that there's alligators in the water. So what are we going to do? Get into a big argument about whether they're saved from alligators by faith or by works? Yeah, we can argue. Were they saved from the alligators by faith or was it by works? Well, if they stayed out of the water, that would make it a work. I wouldn't call that a work. I would call that not being stupid. But they believed that there was alligators in the water. And if they didn't believe that there's alligators in the water, they might go swimming. So we can tell who believes that there's alligators in the water and who doesn't believe. How do we tell? We look and see who goes swimming. So Noah did everything just as God commanded him. Then Yahuwah said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 2 of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate, and also 7 of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth. 7 days from now I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made." So Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters came on the earth, and Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives entered the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Pairs of clean and unclean animals, of birds and of all creatures that move along the ground, male and female, came to Noah and entered the ark, as God had commanded Noah. And after 7 days, the flood waters came on the ark. In the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the 2nd month, on that day all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On that very day Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with his wife and the wives of his 3 sons, entered the ark. They had with them every wild animal according to its kind, all livestock according to their kinds, every creature that moves along the ground according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, everything with wings. Pairs of all creatures that have the breath of life in them came to Noah and entered the ark. The animals were going in were male and female of every living thing, as God had commanded Noah. Then Yahuwah shut him in. For 40 days the flood kept coming on the earth, and as the waters increased, they lifted the ark high above the earth. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. They rose greatly on the earth, and all the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 20 feet. Every living thing that moved on the earth perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all mankind, everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. Men and animals and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds of the air were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those with him on the ark. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. Now, as we see this chronology, we'll see these periods of time. We see 150 days here. We saw before that 40 days, and after this we'll see another period that adds up to a full year. And it's talking about the different stages of the catastrophe. So each stage has its time, and the total length adds up to just a little tiny bit over a year. Okay. Don't get too confused about that. I'm not going to try to take it apart piece by piece. That's not the kind of study this is. One thing to note is that it says that the living creatures came to Noah. He did not have to go across the whole earth rounding up dinosaurs. They came to Noah. Oh, I said dinosaurs, didn't I? Well, didn't all the dinosaurs die in the flood? Well, that's not what it says here. It says here everything that had the breath of life. Dinosaurs had the breath of life. So there was dinosaurs on the ark. Well, where are they now? He asks. Where are they now? I don't know. But I would suspect that since you only had two, let's say two apatosauruses, and maybe they were baby apatosauruses, it would be, there's nothing that says they were full grown on the ark. So you have two baby apatosauruses, and a couple generations after Noah, you have this guy named Nimrod, a mighty hunter on the earth. Mighty hunter, huh? It's like, where did all the mammoths go in North America? Well, that's been pretty well established. When the peoples that came out of Asia and became the first tribes or first nations came across the land bridge at what is now the Bering Strait, it only took them 1,500 years to wipe out all of the non-migratory large mammals in North America as they migrated in their bands of people from Barrow, Alaska, down through Edmonton, Canada, and spread out across what we would call the Mississippi Valley, Mississippi floodplain. 1,500 years, that's all it took. Their hunting wiped out the mammoths, the giant sloth, all of them. The only thing left was the bison, which is migratory, and so didn't stay where the encampments were. And those mammals like the white-tailed deer and the mule deer that hide in the mountains. That's what happened. So could mankind have wiped out the dinosaurs by hunting? Quite easily. But we're not given an instruction on all of that. Is it possible that the dinosaurs were already dead when the ark came along? Yes, it's possible. You see, you can go looking for objections. And if you go looking for objections, you can find something that will satisfy you as an objection. Doesn't mean that it really refutes Scripture. It just satisfies you. Why would somebody want to come up with a refutation of Scripture? Well, Scripture says a lot of things. Scripture, for example, says you can't just break up your marriage and go marry somebody else just because you're tired of that person. But maybe you want to. So maybe you want the Scripture not to be literally true, because if it's literally true, it might tell you what you can and can't do. Well, you can do it, but you won't be pleasing to God, and that could have some rather far-reaching eternal consequences. Or maybe you don't want to believe in eternal consequences to your actions. So you look for things that will disprove in your mind the Bible. Doesn't mean you've really accomplished anything. So we have these things that have offered as objections. It says it went 20 feet above the highest mountain. The highest mountain is Everest, and Everest is 29,000 feet. If you had that much water, so it covered Everest to the depth of 20 feet, then where did all the water go? It goes down, yeah. If Everest was 29,000 feet on the day that Noah entered the ark, yes, we have a problem trying to explain this. Well, we know that the rate that Everest is rising is only 4 centimeters per year, and that would take Yeah. How do you know it was rising at that slow rate then? Well, we know. No, you don't know. Remember, when I was in grade school, plate tectonics was a new science. And it was hailed by a lot of scientists as a great theory. Some said, no, it doesn't fit with, there's those famous words again, settled science. So it was a little bit disputed, and then a lot of Christians came along and said, my, that matches what it says in Genesis about the days of Peleg and the earth being divided. And, well, the Christians believe it, and it's against settled science. Plate tectonics is a Christian pseudoscience. That's what it was called, a Christian pseudoscience. Now, plate tectonics is settled science. You see, a few years from when I'm recording this, I mean in the future, probably the entire history, the entire science books about the Earth's magnetic field will have been rewritten. Everything that was known about how slow the Earth's magnetic poles can change, and reversal is too simple a term for it, can become unstable and go to multipole and then go to reversed polarity. Everything about that is now up for grabs because, right as we speak, the Earth's magnetic field is becoming unstable at a rate that 10 years ago all scientists said it was impossible for the Earth's magnetic field to ever change at anything even close to that rate. I mean, within orders of magnitude. A very loud airplane going over. Helicopter. So, science changes. It's the same way. I will not be surprised if in my lifetime they discover that although Everest is rising at 4 centimeters a year now, that the crashing of the Indian subcontinent into Eurasia happened much more suddenly and violently than has been previously thought. And if that is the case, then the high mountains may mean only 2,000 or 3,000 feet high, not 29,000. Maybe quite a different thing. So it says the floodgates of the deep were opened. It was only a few years ago that it was discovered that there's something, I think it's called woodsonite. It's a funny kind of feldspar that can only exist at very high pressures, high temperature and high pressure. And it's a funny kind of feldspar crystal. And what's funny about it, funny peculiar, is that it actually has more water than rock in the crystal. It's kind of like water that's crystallized. You could almost say it's a special kind of ice. It's a special kind of ice, just like we have sea ice, which is water and salt crystallized together. That it's a kind of a funny sort of ice because it's more water than feldspar mineral, and it exists under the earth in vast quantities. Now they're saying that most of the crust, most of the subcrust, the moho layer, something like that, is made of this. I think it's called woodsonite. It's wood something, and it does not have anything to do with wood. It has to do with some surname or some village name in England where it was first discovered, or some scientist who discovered it, something like that. But anyhow, you have this woodsonite or whatever it's called, and it's this mineral that's mostly water, but it's solid, a kind of rock. Until you take the pressure off of it. And then the water comes out as steam. Part of why some volcanic eruptions are so violent is that what propels it up is all the steam coming from this rock dissociating, this mineral dissociating. Is that the fountains of the deep? Because we now know that there is more water locked in this mineral under the earth. Far, far, far more water locked in this mineral under the earth than in all the oceans and glaciers and ice caps in the entire world. Far more. And yet God has promised that he will not destroy the world with water again. So was that the floodgates of the deep? We don't know. But don't just go laughing, oh, the floodgates of the deep, they're just a myth, what they were talking about. No, it's the limits of what you know scientifically, what mankind knows scientifically. But God knew that this destruction was coming. He planned it. He chose to destroy the wickedness of other men, of other people. And it says in 1 Peter that that Noah and his family were saved by water. That's curious. It doesn't say that they were saved by the box. It says they were saved by water. Well, I thought they were saved by the box, the ark. That's not what's important, apparently. Yes, the box saved them from the water, but it says the water saved them. Well, what did the water save them from? Back in chapter 6, it says, Yahuwah saw how great man's wickedness was on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. They were saved from the evil around them. They were saved from the contaminating effect of the evil in which they lived. And what's more important to God? You see? Faith saves us, and it saves us from the evil in which we live. And when we believe God, when we really believe God, it makes perfect sense to do what he says. The more I teach, the more I'm finding, quite sadly, that although in this area everybody, just about everybody says, oh, I'm a Christian. Yes, I'm a Christian. Everybody's Christians here. When you start talking about simply doing what God says, well, that's a different story. But if we really believe God, we will, like Noah, simply do what God says. But people don't really believe God. They don't really have faith. They like saying that they have faith. But when God says build a box, they go, I'm not going to be a legalist. If I built a box, I'd be being a legalist. And besides, boxes are expensive, wood's expensive, saws are expensive. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of labor, and I've got other things I want to do. And because I have other things I want to do, we'll just say that this whole thing about the box is that's just taking things too literally, and it's legalism. By faith, Noah built a box, and so became the heir of the righteousness that comes by faith.